How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to another Halloween build. In this video, we're going to be working on a Weeping Angel statue, but it's not any normal Weeping Angel statue. This one's going to rise up and scare everybody, hopefully. We'll see. It's going to be a pretty challenging one with all the movements and pneumatics. But yeah, without any further ado, let's get started. Alrighty, so this is our vertical riser that we got from DC Props. We've gotten a few other mechanisms from them, and they're very well built. But this is basically going to rise up 18 inches and bring our statue to its standing position. So this is the waist and thigh portion of our statue. Down here is where it connects to the mechanism with a couple bolts. You can see we cut this at a 50-degree angle so that this then rises up to its standing position with this 3-inch stroke, 1.5-inch bore cylinder that we got from FrightProps. And then make sure you get the mounting nuts for the end of the rod in order to attach that hinge. We had to drill a little bit of a bigger hole in order for that rod to fit into it. But you can see there's a couple hinges connected to this 2x4 down here and then up into that 1x6. And we cut a hole in order for the cylinder to move through that. Now I'm working on the shoulder section for the statue. And this is basically going to bring the arms from out in front of the face and off to the side. This is a 3-inch Lazy Susan with a couple pieces of wood attached to that. 2-inch hinge. And then these are cylinders, also from FrightProps. 3/4-inch bore, 2-inch stroke cylinders with the mounting nuts for the end to attach to the hinge. And this is going to bring both sides in simultaneously in order to move the arms. But this is basically a 1x6 that is 18 inches in length, which is the width of our shoulders. And I will show you how this fits into our prop in a little bit. So if you've seen my other video on the swinging zombie, this is the exact same design for the head. Same exact cylinders as the shoulders. Except the Lazy Susan is now in the middle of this 18-inch 1x6, and we have a head attached to it. So it'll be moving, if I can turn it, it'll be moving it back and forth. The head will be in a specific place so it looks like it's shaking its head. But there we go. This is attached to a, I think this is 3/4-inch PVC, just drilled into those pieces of wood. Again, for all these cylinders, I like putting a couple of nuts and washers in order to build out the ends so that it's level. And then I also like putting lock washers and lock nuts on the end of each of the bolts in order to keep them in place. Okay, I've got the majority of the structure put together. And it's bolted down here to the vertical riser. And I may add another horizontal brace in order to connect it up there so it can't pivot back and forth. But I've got the vertical 1x4s to connect this bottom torso up to the shoulder area, and then the horizontal 1x3 in order to screw it in. A couple 1x4s here to build out this gap so that these are able to swivel, and then obviously the head on top. When it's all said and done, he'll be leaning over the pedestal and his arms will be covering up his face. But when it's triggered, this part will come up and then the vertical riser will rise up. I won't be able to lift it up all the way, but you can see down there, its arms will move from out in front of its face and its head's moving back and forth. We got this nasty mask right here. I'm gonna paint it so that it looks more like statue color. It may keep some of the blood, but I also got this yarn wig right here that'll go on top of that, so it'll look more like a statue when it's down in its resting position. I also drilled the hole into the foam at a little bit of an angle, so that the head is more parallel with the ground. It'll be flush with the pedestal that it is resting on. So that will make it look a little better. So I went ahead and bolted the main structure to the mechanism with this 2x4 and the bolt that runs through both the wood and the metal. That keeps it nice and sturdy. I also started working on the arms with this 3/4 inch PVC, and I used the heat gun in order to flatten this out and then bend it at the elbow. And I'm going to keep messing with that until I get it to the right shape that I want. But basically when it's triggered and it stands up, the arms move away from its face into like its scaring position. And we got hands that are coming in that are going to go on the end of these. Okay, so I ran all the air line to each of the cylinders. These two, for these shoulders, they do the same thing, so they have the splitter for both the A and the B valves to move them at the same time. You got the head, and then the waist, and down here for the vertical riser. So all the tubing's ran, and it's all hooked up to our controllers and solenoids, but I'll show you how all that mess works once I clean it up. But now, it's running, so I'm going to go ahead and press the button. It rises up, the hands move away from its face. You can see the cylinder working to move the head back and forth. Still got to work on timing and everything, but let's see, it comes down, lowers down, the hands move back over it, and it's back in its weeping position. So, working pretty good. This is the pedestal, or at least the start of a pedestal, that the statue is weeping over. You can see how it basically comes up right underneath the statue. And this is made out of 1x3s. It's 2 foot by 2 foot, and then 30 inches in height. But next I'm gonna go around the outside with a 2-inch foam so that I can then carve like a curve going down. Alright, now I have the 2-inch foam surrounding the entire box, and there's 2 layers of it. This first layer, it's 2 inches down from the top so that I can put a piece of molding around it, and then comes down 4 inches from the ground so that I can build out some more molding at the bottom. But then there's this 11-inch section, and that will follow the curve so that I can then carve it out farther. So yeah, now time to try carving this. Okay, so I started sculpting it, and I think it's working pretty well. I'm using this handheld sander and just going along. I draw out the curve that I want and then slowly sculpt away at the foam. So yeah, this is pretty tedious, but I think it'll look pretty nice once it's all finished. Okay, so I finished carving it. I think it turned out pretty well. I'm gonna keep messing with the shape a little bit. That's generally what it's gonna look like. And like I said, it was really tedious, and it created a huge mess. So definitely wear your mask, because it throws a bunch of fine foam particles into the air, and you don't want to breathe that in. But now I'm working on the plywood base. This is 1/2-inch plywood. It's 54 inches by 40 inches. You can see how the pedestal sits 8 inches from either side, because I'm going to build out a couple other foam pieces, and I left some room in the back for the rest of the prop. And because the prop is going to be bolted to that, I added some 1x3s underneath it so the bolts can go through the plywood. Alright, so these are the stepped foam pieces that go underneath the pedestal. I haven't glued them in yet, and that's why they aren't quite aligned. But you can see that I have the bigger piece of foam underneath and then the smaller piece on the top in order to create that 2-inch step. And then I also use the router to get this decorative edge along the entire pedestal. And in the back, I cut out this section for the mechanism to sit into so that we can then bolt it into the plywood. But once I'm done with the statue, the robes will cover up this whole area so you won't be able to see it. So I wanted a way to get into the pedestal without having like a trap door on the side. So I decided to make a lid for the top, and it's basically just some 1/4-inch Luan 1x3s and 1x2s, and it sits into this little space right in there, and the Luan overhangs on either side of these 1x3s. So that way I'll be able to store all my controllers and electronics in there for the prop. I glued all the bottom pieces of foam down and then went over with the Dremel to roughen up some of the edges with the sander bit. And then at the top, I added this 1/2-inch piece of foam and used a router to get the decorative edge. And the lid's off right now, just so I could show you that I took off the 1x3s because it wasn't fitting right. So now it fits nice and snug. And then I also have this guy bolted down to the plywood, and he's ready to be tested. So I'll go ahead and show you how the brains of this prop works. Alright, so I've got this cleaned up a little better. I know it still looks like a mess, but I promise it all works. So we use the BooBox Flex, and all of our pneumatics and controllers, we get them from FrightProps, and they have videos and pamphlets to show you how to wire and program everything. This is programmed by the computer with the SD card, but it's very simple. But basically the rundown, we've got a solenoid for each one of the cylinders. This one powers the lifter mechanism. This one's for the waist, the head, the arms. And make sure when you get these to also get the speed control valves because you want to be able to control the speed of each one of the cylinders individually, and that helps a lot. We also get regulators to control the pressure because we don't need a lot of pressure for the arms or the head. We need more pressure for the waist and the lifter. Alright, so I'll talk about the wiring a little bit. Because we got this solenoid with our lifter, it came with its own AC plug. So we got a relay board in order to actually wire the extension cord into it. Because these solenoids are all DC, so they can actually wire into these outputs on the controller. But if you want to plug for like scare lighting or ambient lighting, and you can wire an extension cord directly into the relays. We also have the input. We're using an infrared sensor for this prop. The wiring differs for some other inputs, so you can wire it with like a button or a pressure plate or whatever you want to use. These are the wings so far, and I plan on bolting or screwing them into the back side of the prop. And the way I did this, I used the heat gun, and same as the arms, I heated up the 3/4 inch PVC and then bent it to the wing shape that I wanted. I added this smaller piece on the end here, and then I took this chicken wire grate and cut it to the wing shape and used these metal wires to connect it to the PVC. And I plan on using this gray felt to actually make it look more like a wing. So I've got one side of the wing done with the felt, and it seems to be working really well. You just gotta cut it to the right shape. And then I started using like a fabric glue, but then it really wasn't sticking, so I'm using the hot glue gun, and that's working nicely. But yeah, I've got these longer pieces here, and then some shorter ones at the top, and they fold over to cover up the PVC. I still gotta figure out what I wanna do with the connection there. And then the other side isn't done yet, but you can see the chicken wire. And I'm going to try to match up the felt on either side. Alright, so I finished the back side. And then I also went ahead and bolted it. I added this piece of wood on the back and put a couple bolts going through that. And then these screws are just keeping it from wobbling up and down. Once I actually attach this, I'm going to screw it in a few different places and secure it. But it looks pretty nice when it's attached, and then when it's up it looks pretty good as well. So coming along nicely. Time to make the other one. Alright, so I finished the chicken wire for the main body. Up here you can see how it goes around the head so that it's still able to turn without getting caught on that. And again in the back. And then for the arms, same thing, it's cut out so that the arms are able to move back and forth. And then down here, when this closes back down, this. It basically comes down to right about there. And then right now it has a pretty big butt, but once we put the robes on, it won't be that obvious. But the reason for that is because it needs to cover up this whole mechanism once it lowers back down without getting caught on anything. I also added a couple pieces of wood around the frame in order for the chicken wire to rest onto. And I'm using screws, and then I'm just twisting the wire around that to keep it in place. Alrighty, so as you can see, I've got both of the wings on, and I also put the robes around him. I had to cut a couple holes for the wings to stick through. And as of right now, it's a little too short when it stands up. When it's down, kneeling down, it's alright. But I'll show you when it stands up that I'm gonna have to eventually add some fabric and some hanging off the back. So yeah, I'll show you it testing. I really like it with the wings on there. Adds a little bit more motion. And as you can see, it's a little too short when it's standing up, so I'll have to add some more fabric. But he's looking pretty good. So when you're programming this with the BooBox, you have to download the Director software onto your computer, and they make it really easy to upload some sound. So I went ahead and created some using Audacity and took some samples that I got that I bought from Poison Props a while back, and some other ones online. So I'll go ahead and show you it running with the painted clothes and then the sound. So I also added some of these crying noises at the end, just to add to the effect of the weeping angel. Alrighty, so believe it or not, it's been around 4 months since the last clip. I just got back from college for the summer. I'm getting back to work on the angel, and I went ahead and put the hands on. We got these from Ghostride Productions. They're very realistic looking. But I'm going to be painting over them to make it look like the statue. And right now I just have them taped on. But what I did is I bored out a hole that goes to right about there for the PVC to fit into it. And then I'm going to glue it in with probably some spray foam. But I got to paint it first. So one of the final details for the foam is this skull emblem thing that's going to be glued onto the front of the pedestal. And the way I did this is I cut out 2 pieces out of the 1/2-inch foam using the Dremel, one larger piece for the base, and then a second one to be glued on top. And then I cut a hole for the skull to be glued into with some liquid nails. And then I used this like wire brush, toothbrush thing, and started carving away where I wanted to. And then finally used the sandpaper and sanded it all out. And it turned out pretty nicely. It's going to be basically placed on the front like this. I'll probably glue it in and then hard coat everything. So yeah, I've got the entire pedestal hard coated now. I use this Flex Bond mortar. It's the white kind, and it just comes in a powder. I put a few scoops into a bucket, put some water in there, and mix it up until I get it to a nice consistency. I can spread it with a paintbrush. And I tried to smooth out the mortar so it wasn't too textured. You can stipple it with like a paintbrush or a sponge if you want a textured look. But I was going for more of a smooth look with this pedestal. But yeah, after it dries, it's time for paint. So I've got a base coat of paint on everything now. I just used an electric sprayer and some water-based paint. I mixed up like a light gray with a tiny bit of brown for the pedestal, along with the hands and the face. But I had to use basically pure white for the rest of the statue because the fabric basically soaked up the paint, and it was a darker fabric to begin with. But I matched it pretty good. I'm gonna age it with some browns and blacks next to darken it up even more and make it look more like stone. I've got the first layer done for the aging with the black. For the pedestal, I used watered down black with a paintbrush and some paper towels to wipe a lot of it off. I did that for the hands and the face as well. And then for the rest of the statue, I used some black spray paint to get some darker color on there. So next I'm going to take some green and brown and put it in the spray gun and add some more aging. Alrighty, well there we have it. It's pretty much all done and detailed with the browns and greens. I dry brushed in some areas as well around the pedestal. And I also added this light green lichen in some areas too. I've just got to pin down the fabric in the back and position the hands and glue them in up here. But yeah, it's pretty much all done. All right, so I just finished wiring in the strobe light for the scare lighting for the prop. It's this Big Shot LED 2. And I basically stripped an extension cord and wired it into the relay for the BooBox, similar to how I did the vertical riser. I also added some Velcro in certain places, like along the arms, and then down the entire middle of the robes, so I can get into the prop just in case I need to fix any of the pneumatics or anything inside of it. I may do some touch-up painting, some more greens, browns, and areas. But yeah, it's pretty much done now. Go ahead and like and follow us on our YouTube page. We have some other how to build videos and also some walkthrough videos of our haunt. Go ahead and check us out on Facebook as well, Haunt for HEP. We raise money for the Homeless Empowerment Program and would love your guys' help with that this year. But yeah, I'll go ahead and give you guys some testing footage right now and some more at nighttime with the lighting. But yeah, thank you guys for watching. Happy Halloween, happy haunting. We'll see you guys next time.